And we're back with a midweek mock, and today we're just gonna go one round. I know on the previous one we did two, but today keep it simple. Let's go through one as free agency is already underway, and it's been crazy so far. Still a couple big names that need to fall, but I mean, hey, we're over here on the mock draft database, and let's get to it, man. No trades in this one. Next one, we're gonna get crazy and go from there. But for now, let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget, drop a like, subscribe to the channel as this is a brand new one and we're trying to grow it. Can't get there without you. Number one is the Tennessee Titans. I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. I think they need a quarterback. We all know they need a quarterback, and Brian Callahan, as an offensive mind, needs a quarterback to keep his job. Cam Ward is going to be the guy going forward as Will Levis. That experiment is over. Now, as a Browns fan, we have some options. We could go quarterback because, well, we do need one, but I've been on this train, whether if we had Miles or we didn't have Miles Garrett. Tremendous player, but at this point in time, I was actually okay with the idea of trading Miles Garrett. Whatever. Things happen. We brought him back. Tremendous player. But I think Abdul Carter, he needs a pass rushing mate. And we've seen in Miles Garrett's tenure as a Brown, when he has a dominant edge on the other side, his numbers skyrocket. Jadeveon Clowney took a step back. He wasn't in his prime when we brought him to Cleveland, but I mean, hey, he was good enough where Miles Garrett had some of his best years, and we went to the playoffs just 2 years ago when Clowney was here. We just need some help alongside Miles Garrett for him to get back to where he was. But for us to now have Abdul Carter, two potential generational pass rushers, the Browns could be back in business a couple years down the line. Again, we still need a quarterback. Looks like that's going to be Kirk Cousins. For the Giants at number three, I think it comes down to who's making the decision. Is it Brian Daboll, whose job is ultimately on the line next season, or is it Joe Schoen, the GM? If it's the GM, which they typically do make the selection, I'm looking at it like I want the best football player available. I want Travis Hunter, a guy that could be generational in this league. But on Brian Daboll's argument, this team needs a quarterback. Otherwise, I don't know who it's going to be going into next season. I do want to say this in this previous free agency, they grabbed Javon Holland on a nice deal. They were able to sign Paulson Adebo coming off of a career year. You still have Deonte Banks out of Maryland, who's a young prospect that has had a couple years in the league at this point. For the Giants, do you need a defensive back? No. I think you do need a quarterback more, and that's a more valuable position? Absolutely. But again, I want the best football player available, and I'm going to go with Travis Hunter. Is it a bit of a crazy take? Maybe, because of how valuable the quarterback position is. But hey, to each his own. I'm going to go with Travis Hunter if I'm the GM on the clock for the Giants. Give me the best football player, man. Now, for New England, it's no secret. You hammered the defensive side of the ball with guys like Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, just to name a few there in New England. You need offense now. And most notably, you need to protect your franchise quarterback in Drake May. So I think it really comes down to who do you want? Do you want Armand Membu or Will Campbell? I'm still on the Will Campbell side. I want a guy that has a high floor and probably just as high of a ceiling, if not just below a guy like Armand Membu. I want someone who's safe, someone who we can plug in on multiple positions and they can be dominant. I'm going to grab Will Campbell, if I could say his name correctly. There we go, out of LSU. He can play guard, he can play tackle. I'm not worried about the short arms. If you can play, you can play. At number 5, Jacksonville, I'm just going to go best player available. You didn't really do any, I guess, crazy moves here in free agency as you were kind of cap hold, but just go best player available. I know that Liam Cohen is an offensive coach, but let's address this defensive line. Winning in the trenches is how you win football games in 2025. It's really always been the recipe, but especially after what we just saw what the Eagles did, I think a lot of teams are going to replicate that. And getting those big guys up front that could be game changers, like a Jalen Carter for Philly, you can get a Mason Graham here for Jacksonville, and he can do just that, if not more, than what Jalen Carter has been able to do in his young career. Now, for Vegas, you had a busy offseason. You bring in Pete Carroll. He's changing the landscape, as well as Chip Kelly. You've picked up a guy like Alex Kappa, who was the Triple Crown winner last year on the offensive line. And then you also bring in Geno Smith. So now you have questions of, well, do we want to go defense? Do we want to go offense? I think let's go out there and get your workhorse, your guy that you can hand the ball to in an offense that lacks playmakers outside of Brock Bowers. Let's go Ashton Jeanty, a guy that has insane contact balance. It's crazy. I don't know if I've seen a running back with better contact balance than Ashton Jeanty. but his production was off the charts. He carried the Broncos to the college football playoff. He's such a special player and is such a special talent. And I think the Raiders are going to be excited to put that card in on draft night. Now, at number 7, the Jets have a lot of needs, but it really comes down to what's the most valuable position in football. And I know this might piss some people off, but at the end of the day, the quarterback is the most important position. And for the Jets, you only signed Justin Fields to a 2-year deal. It's kind of a prove-it deal. What are we getting out of him as you're giving up a lot of his money up front in year number 1? So obviously, they want to see what they have in Justin Fields. I think, hey, if you're Aaron Glenn, you bring in this mentality of you got to earn it. It's going to be a tough physical environment from day number 1. You got to earn your spot. You got to earn your stripes and your playing time. So I think you go out there, let's get some competition. Let's get a guy in Shedeur Sanders that's accurate. He always throws on time. He's potentially the best quarterback in his class, and he could be your guy going forward, if not Justin Fields. Now, for Shedeur Sanders, you're going into an offense that, again, has the weapons around you with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. For Justin Fields, Shedeur Sanders, it's going to be an interesting competition from day number 1. You still got Tyrod Taylor in the mix, who's going to be a great veteran mouthpiece for either quarterback going into next year. So Shedeur, due to the price of how valuable the position is, I like Shedeur to the Jets at number 7. For Carolina at number 8, it's really still best player available. This roster all around is not the greatest. And now I know they re-signed J.C. Horn to a big old contract this offseason, as well as bringing in a guy like Trayvon Moehrig, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of that, you still need some defensive front help outside of losing Brian Burns from last season. I think you look at this edge class and I think you say, hey, what do we want? Do we want the production or do we want the athletic profile or do we want to try and find a combination of both? Shemar Stewart gives you the best athletic profile out of anybody left on the board here for the edge rushers. But I still look at this class and I want to say, I want a combination of both. I want an athletic freak, but a guy that has dominated as far as his statistical numbers last year. And I can see that translating to the NFL level as well. I like Mike Green. I'm still in the Mike Green camp. I can see the Shemar Stewart hype. I could see Mykel Williams or Jalen Walker. I'm just in the Mike Green camp. So I want him at number 8 to Carolina. I know he has a lot of off-the-field stuff that could push him down the board, but if that gets cleared up, I think Mike Green's better than the rest of those guys that were available. Now, for the Saints, not a lot has happened this offseason outside of bringing in Kellen Moore. For me, I think you look at your roster and you say, well, we have an offense that, is not the greatest. We have Chris Olave, but he deals with a lot of injuries. Alvin Kamara is very solid and productive for his age, but he's eventually going to slow down. This offensive line with Talise Fuaga is solid up front. It could use some pieces, no doubt about it. But this wide receiver core, it's Chris Olave who's injured. Outside of that, it's MVS and who else, right? So I'm going to go with Tetairoa McMillan. I like this pickup. You have an offensive coach, a guy that wants to throw the football, and you get now Chris Olave and Ted McMillan. I like that. With Juwan Johnson, who you re-signed, I think it could be a surprising offensive unit next season under Kellen Moore. Now, for the Bears at number 10, their offensive line is fine now. I think we could safely say that Caleb was sacked 68 times last year, the second most by a rookie quarterback in NFL history. Not really what you want to be on the leaderboards for, but they've addressed that offensive line under Ben Johnson, trading for Jonah Jackson, trading for Joe Thuney, of course, all-pro guard. And then also you go out there and sign a Drew Dalman out of Atlanta, who was one of the better offensive linemen according to PFF last year. So the offensive line is fine. But I will say this, if you want to go out there and just completely revamp the group and grab an Armand Membu, I get that logic. But for me, I think there's bigger needs at this point in time. I think you address this defensive front. Yeah, Montez Sweat, let's go out there and get him a pass rushing partner, but also a guy that you can use in a variety of different ways. Well, if you want to have him at linebacker to guard the Hawkinsons, the Laportas of the world, or if you want to have him rushing the passer. Jalen Walker gives you a lot of versatility and just an athletic freak. So we're going to bring him to Chicago to fill a lot of needs there. Now, for San Francisco, we'll keep this quick. You lost a lot of veterans this offseason, especially on the defensive end. Guys like Dre Greenlaw, guys like, Charvarius Ward. I think you need a cornerback one now. You need a boundary corner, and I know there's questions about his injury concerns, but look, if there was no injuries, he'd be probably the cornerback one in this class and a bona fide top 5 pick. I'm going to go Will Johnson. I think San Fran doesn't overthink it. They grab a guy that comes into San Fran, and hey, at the very worst, he fits in with the San Francisco culture of star players getting hurt year after year, seemingly. But Will Johnson's such a talented player. He just needs to be healthy. And if he is, he has the potential to be a top five corner in just a few years in his NFL career. I think he can have a similar impact from day one of like a Christian Gonzalez did for New England just about a year ago. After that, at 12, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I think you look at it, you say, we have a quarterback, Dak Prescott, coming off a pretty serious knee injury, and we haven't done anything in free agency to move the needle. Let's just go out there and protect our quarterback. So at the bare minimum, he's going to have at least another split second or a couple seconds there in the pocket next season because he's going to need it with the weapons around him. So let's make his job a little bit easier. Grabbing Armand Membu could play inside, outside. He could be your Zach Martin replacement. Now at 13, the Miami Dolphins, this is such a shoo-in pick of Tyler Booker, so I'm going to switch it up today. I know everybody goes Tyler Booker, interior offensive lineman for the Dolphins. I'm gonna go Kelvin Banks, so it's the same position group, but it's a little bit of a different pick because I think he can play tackle better than a guy like Tyler Booker. So to me, I think it's easier to slide inside compared to sliding outside in Tyler Booker's case. So Kelvin Banks, it has the potential to play outside and inside, and I think Miami looks at that, and I think that's a better fit for them going forward because he could play multiple positions on that struggling offensive line. Now, for Indianapolis at 14, we're just going to make this simple. Every time I see this, we're going to make the selection Tyler Warren to Indianapolis. We're done with Kylan Granson. We're done with Mo Alley Cox. This carousel of okay tight ends that you've had since Dallas Clark left town. Let's end that, right? Eric Ebron, throw him into the mix, right? He was in there around 2016. Andrew Luck days. But outside of that, let's just get our bona fide guy, a guy that his production is off the charts, but he also fits our system to a T. Shane Steichen loves to run the football. We have Jonathan Taylor. Let's go out there and get the best run blocking tight end in the class in Tyler Warren. But he's also very smart in space and could be a safety blanket for Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. Love that pick there. Atlanta at 15, we're just going to go best edge available, which I think off the athletic profile, they're going to go with Shamar Stewart, a guy that blew everybody away at the combine, and really his draft stock might have rose the most out of anybody out there on the combine weekend. He goes to Atlanta. They were bottom 2 in sacks. Let's get a guy that wasn't necessarily his role at Texas A&M. It was more so to set the edge, but a guy that has all the athletic tools to be a dominant pass rusher at the NFL level. So let's get him there and actually let him rush the passer. Why don't we here in Atlanta? At 16, the Arizona Cardinals. You could go James Pierce. You could go Donovan Anzaraku or Michael Williams. But for me, this is a team that you brought in Josh Sweat, of course, Super Bowl champion. You brought in Davis Gather, of course, who's a good outside linebacker. But if you're Arizona, to me, you still need to address this defensive front. You have a lot of teams in this division that love to run the football and a lot of talented quarterbacks in this division. So let's put some pressure on them. I'm going to go with a top 10 player on my board, period, which is Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. I love him. I think he's a disruptor. I think he eats double teams almost every single play. And now all of a sudden, if you're Arizona, you have Walter Nolan up front. You got Josh Sweat on the edge. Davis Gather, who you brought in. You got some other solid pieces in this front seven. All of a sudden, now you can put some pressure on Brock Purdy, Matthew Stafford, and Sam Darnold, who is in your division. Of course, and you got to play them a couple times a year. For Cincinnati here at 17, I'm going to go with a player that really just fits a lot. Like again, the AFC North, we have Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb when healthy, and of course, if you were Pittsburgh, you have Jaylen Warren now. These teams love to run the football. I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant, a guy that is going to add to a defense that desperately needs help, and he's just going to be a disruptor up front, potentially a top 5 to 10 player in this class. Cincinnati gets a little bit of a value there in the middle of the first round. Now, Seattle is up here. They can go a variety of different directions, but again, you traded away Geno Smith. You brought in Sam Darnold. Does that fix a lot? Does that elevate your ceiling? I guess we're going to have to wait and see. You could go wide receiver here because you lost Tyler Lockett and you lost DK Metcalf. So getting a guy like Matthew Golden could be a great selection here. Or if you want to stay with the Ohio State bloodline, grab Emeka Ibuka and just have two slot wide receivers out there cooking everybody with their route running ability. But I think interior offensive line in an offense that wants to run the football, control the clock, I'm going to go with not Tyler Booker here. I'm going to go with a guy that I have above him in my top 50, Donovan Jackson. And let me sell this pick to you. This is a guy that last year started at offensive guard for Ohio State. Then Josh Simmons got hurt early in the year. They needed someone to slide out to tackle. Donovan Jackson slid out to tackle, okay? So he slid out to tackle for the first time in his career, and he dominated. Sure, he started off rough in the game against Texas in the regular season, but throughout the remainder of the year after that Texas game, especially in that college football playoff run, he dominated. He only allowed two pressures that entire college football playoff run. So this is a guy that could be an elite guard, or he has the potential to be a great tackle at the next level. Seattle gets a lot of flexibility there. I love that pick for them. Yes, I have him over Tyler Booker in my top 50. Now for Tampa, you can go a lot of different ways. And in the offseason, you brought back Chris Godwin, which I'm happy they did, and paid him pretty handsomely. You brought back Levante David, who's a four-lifer. This might be his last year, though, so keep that in mind. I do want to say the underrated free agency signing that they did have, Hassan Reddick, coming into this defense, I think is a perfect fit. So I don't think we need to go edge rusher here. Outside of that, let's go with a guy in Jahad Campbell that can rush the passer, and he has a history of that at Alabama, or he could be the heir apparent to a guy like Levante David in just about a year's time. He's good in pass. He's the best linebacker in pass coverage this year. Let me say that. But he also brings that elite pass rushing ability. So I think Tampa Bay looks at it. They get an amazing linebacker prospect, and he's going to help out a lot in this NFC South division with talented running backs like Alvin Kamara, like Bijan Robinson, who can get out in the open field and be great route runners. Or again, he could just be great at sniffing out the run and coming up with some big plays in that department. Now at pick 20, the Denver Broncos, this is going to be another shoe-in pick. We're going to go Colston Loveland. He's so smart in space where, again, you saw a lot with Travis Kelce in the playoffs. He didn't really have a route tree. He didn't even really have a designed route. They had everybody else around him, and then he would just sneak out and just find space for Patrick Mahomes. I think Colston Loveland can do that for a guy like Bo Nix in this division, but also for the same reasons that Tyler Warren went to Indy. Colston Loveland is a great run blocker, so he goes to Denver. They want to run the football, but at the end of the day, he could also be this team's Jimmy Graham, where he can be great in the receiving game. So Colston Loveland to Denver, it's a shoe-in fit. For Pittsburgh, you have a lot of different needs here, but you don't need receiver anymore. You traded for DK Metcalf. The problem is you need a quarterback because we don't know who that is at this point in time. I think all signs kind of point to it being Aaron Rodgers. So keep that in mind as this offense gets Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf added to the team. You could go offensive tackle because you just lost the guy, of course, Dan Moore, who wasn't great by all means and got a crazy contract from the Tennessee Titans. Regardless, you could go offensive tackle, but I think as of right now, it fits the Pittsburgh DNA to go with just an athletic freak on the defensive line who's just going to put a lot of pressure and make this defense as top five again, because that's just the Mike Tomlin, I guess, MO is just to have a crazy defense and a subpar offense, and that's going to lead them to an 8, 9, maybe 10 win season. I'm going to go with Mykel Williams. When I watch him, I just see Steelers. I just see Pittsburgh player. He's an athletic freak off the edge. You can have him in rotation with Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, and it just adds so much depth and quality depth to this defensive line, who also has Cam Hayward in the middle. That Pittsburgh front is scary for all these AFC North teams in the division. Really everybody around the league, of course. For the Chargers at 21, you could go a lot of different ways. I'm going to sell this pitch to you guys. As of right now, at the recording of this video, Asante Samuel Jr. is not signed. He's a free agent, and it doesn't really look like he's going to be back with the Chargers. So if you're the Chargers, you need a cornerback. I think you get Jahdae Barron, who's just a baller. He's a playmaker. I've talked about him in depth on this channel, but if you need a quick rundown, here it is. He played for Texas 2 years ago when they were in the Big 12. He was a slot cornerback. And what did he do? Well, he was first team all Big 12. Then this past year when Texas went to the SEC, he moved out to the boundary. What did he do? Well, he was first team all SEC. So he's a baller. He can give you a lot of versatility. And to me, if you can bring back Asante Samuel, all of a sudden, you got Asante Samuel, you got Jahdae Barron, and you got Derwin James flying around the secondary, which again is very complex. I like Jahdae Barron to the Chargers. Could you go a couple different directions? Absolutely. Maybe a wide receiver, but I'm going to go Jahdae Barron. I think the receivers down the board, guys like Savion Williams, guys like Jaden Higgins, could be huge additions to this Chargers offense. For Green Bay, you need a receiver, you need a number one, but it doesn't fit in Green Bay's DNA. When's the last time they drafted a weapon in round one or two? Let's be real, right? I think you go James Pierce, you take a shot on him. I know there's a lot of questions around his character, but for Green Bay, you just lost Preston Smith last year. Let's go out there and get a guy that could be his replacement, but the next great edge for us at the next level. I mean, he's an athletic freak. He ran a 4.440, even though also having elite production last year at Tennessee. Let's bring him into Green Bay, and he can hopefully put pressure on J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams, and, of course, Jared Goff there with those great offensive lines. We need someone that can help, I guess, kind of even out the playing field. James Pierce, I think, is a good fit. For Minnesota, I had this in my first mock draft. Malachi Starks. You could go Nick Emanwari. You could go maybe with an offensive lineman because their offensive line was extremely overrated last year. But for me, I think, hey, Harrison Smith's getting up there. This is probably his last year. You brought back Byron Murphy, so you don't need a cornerback. So let's go out there and get a guy in Malachi Starks that can play on the back end with a guy like Harrison Smith, and they can fly around the field. They can just make plays because they're both ball hawks. And Malachi Starks is also a very willing tackler in this division. I like him there out of Georgia to Minnesota. Now for Houston, this was a shoo-in pick for me. I had Emeka Egbuka. He's the best friend of CJ Stroud. They, are going to have chemistry from day number one. And I said they can plug and play him with all the questions around the wide receiver position because Stephon Diggs is hurt, coming off an injury, and he might not be back. Tank Dell is coming off an injury. He's not going to be ready until week 10 or 11. So you could still go with Emeka Egbuka, but that was until the last couple of days where they traded away Kenyon Green and they traded away Laremy Tunsil, both of the blindside offensive linemen for your young superstar quarterback and CJ Stroud. I don't understand the logic. I understand you had to do it for cap reasons, but it's also, I think, more important to protect your franchise quarterback than to worry about the cap space. Regardless, you need offensive linemen. And I think you look at it if you're Houston, let's go out there and replace our Kenyon Green. Let's get Tyler Booker, and he can play, of course, and be dominant on the inside there for the Houston Texans. It sucks because Emeka Egbuka, I think, would be a perfect fit. But as of right now, you need to protect the passer, and Tyler Booker does a tremendous job of doing that. So he goes to Houston. For the Rams, you could use a lot of things. I do want to say the defense is young. It's fun. It's going to get so much better next year with guys on the back end that are underrated like Cameron Kinchins. You could go cornerback here. I think that's definitely in the cards. But if I'm the Rams, I'm looking at it and saying we need offensive linemen. I'm going to go with Josh Simmons, who is coming off of a pretty serious knee injury. So keep that in mind. But he's back and ready to go. He's going to be ready for week number one. I like him for the Rams there and to protect Matthew Stafford in what could be his last dance. For Baltimore, hear me out on this one. I tried to sell you guys on it last time, and a lot of you guys actually love the pick. So shout out to you guys that watched that first 2-round mock draft. When I see this cornerback, I see Baltimore Raven. And I say this for these AFC North players because there's a certain mentality and a toughness that you need to have to play in this division. I like Benjamin Morrison. You draft him, he goes to a very depleted cornerback room. And with Marlon Humphrey only getting more hurt over the years, and he's getting older just in general, you kind of need his boundary corner replacement. I think you get Benjamin Morrison, who's coming off an injury, but he'll be fine. He can guard the Jamar Chases of the world. He can guard the DK Metcalfs of the world, the T. Higgins, the George Pickens. And I'm not going to say he's going to shut him down, but I think he's going to be a great pick next to Marlon Humphrey. And it's going to give you a great chance to guard these elite offenses down the stretch of the season or, hey, in division, right, which is what you really got to focus on. I like Benjamin Morrison. Is it a bit of a reach? Maybe, considering his injury history. But I love the pick for Baltimore to go with BMO there in the end of the first round. Now, for the Detroit Lions, we had a bit of an issue here, right? My camera kind of stopped recording. So let me run through the pick really quick here for you guys. Derek Harmon is supposed to go to Washington, and Donovan Anzaraku is going to Detroit. Detroit needs edge help next to Aiden Hutchinson, who, by the way, was playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level last year. So if I'm Detroit, let's go out there and just continue to add depth to this team that had so many injuries on this group last year. But for a division, again, you have a lot of talented offensive quarterbacks and running units. So let's go out there and get Donovan Anzaraku to go and pair up with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson to help out this defensive front. Now, for Washington, I have them going with Derek Harmon. He is your John Allen replacement. I never thought that John Allen was going to be kind of shipped out of town there in Washington, but Jonathan Allen is gone. You get Derek Harmon. He's a disruptor up front, and next to Deron Payne and Johnny Newton, that defensive line is still intact, and they're still going to be dominant in a division that has teams like, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles, who like to run the football. So Washington adds to the defensive interior. Again, Detroit gets another edge rusher. So again, the picks are backwards, basically, was what I'm getting at there. Now, for Buffalo, we'll go through these last couple picks quickly because, well, a lot can change from now until the draft. I'm going to go with Matthew Golden. This team needs a field stretcher. They have their savvy route runner underneath who's got great chemistry with the quarterback in Khalil Shakir, who rightfully so they took care of this offseason. But you need a boundary wide receiver. And the guy last year, that was Amari Cooper. He might not be back. You also had Mac Hollins. He might not be back. I know you brought in Josh Palmer, but that really doesn't move the needle for me. We're going to get Matthew Golden. To me, the second best wide receiver in this class, and you get him at pick 30. I think that's a great value there for Buffalo. At 31, the Kansas City Chiefs, you need offensive linemen, but I will say that you've brought in a couple offensive linemen in free agency after losing Joe Thuney. So I think, if you're Kansas City, should you go with Ariante Ursery or Josh Connerly? Absolutely. But to me, I think you also look at it and say Gray Zabel could be in that mix as well. If you're Kansas City, you just lost Justin Reed, a guy that was so pivotal on the back end of this defense. So let's go out there and get an absolute freak out of South Carolina in Nick Eamon-Worry, and he's going to give Spags such a fun weapon to use on that back end. He's your Justin Reed replacement, but I think he's going to be better than Justin Reed. So Nick Eamon-Worry out of South Carolina. Is it your biggest need? No, but I think it's a great player to add at this point in the draft. And at 32, you can go really any direction here for the Philadelphia Eagles. So you could go Emeka Egbuka to just add to this offense. I've seen some people say go Amarion Hampton here to just continue to add to this running back room. That's scary. You could go Gray Zabel to be your Mekhi Becton replacement up front. That's a direction you could go. But to me, I think you go out there and you try and replace or at least replenish this defensive line after losing guys like Milton Williams and, of course, Josh Sweat there on the edge. My highest rated edge left on the board right now is Princely Uman-Mielen, so I'm just going to go there for the Eagles to close out this first round draft. If you guys did enjoy, let me know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't like, and let me know how you would fix it if that is the case. But also, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I know I talked a lot here in today's video, so if you made it to this point, thank you. And I'll see you guys soon as draft season is only heating up.